Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back to the second hour of news and views on Salam Media. It's just gone 11 after 9 o'clock, and our first guest in the second hour is Ashraf Patel. He's a senior research associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. And we are going to be looking at the Maldives elections. I guess we want to know who is the Maldives president-elect, Mohamed Muizzu. I think that's how it's pronounced, Muizzu. And what does he stand for? He's pretty young, I think just over his mid-40s. And let's welcome to the show Ashraf Patel. Assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam, Auntie Julie. Hope you're well on this cold Monday morning. Unlike Maldives, which is probably tropical. So we are in a different world, yes.
In fact, when I was looking at the story this morning, I was thinking Maldives has been top of our minds here in South Africa for two reasons. Up until recently, it was a very preferred honeymoon destination for young people getting married in South Africa. That's where they headed to. In fact, both my sons and their wives visited the Maldives over a year ago, possibly just over 2 years ago. And then the other reason why the Maldives is very top of the mind is the Hello Darlings scandal, the holiday destination person that took so very many people for a ride.
Definitely.
Promoting this destination.
It's a tropical island, yes.
Yeah, so that was a very sad state of affairs. I think lots of people lost out on very hard-earned cash to that lady, the lady of the Hello Darlings scandal. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Because so many people have been and are still interested in the Maldives, let us understand,
Yes.
the geopolitical situation, the people that populate that area understand that it is a majority Muslim country. And Alhamdulillah, let's see what these recent election really means for them and for us as future visitors. So the victory of Muizzi in the Maldives election is really significant for very many reasons. Why, Ashraf? What are the reasons that it's popular for and significant rather? Let's understand those reasons, please.
Yes, Julie. Maldives, like Mauritius and Sri Lanka, are island states in the Indian Ocean, the South Indian Ocean. And as a result, they occupy a very strategic space in the global trade and geo-economic rivalries that are emerging. So, although it's a very small island nation state of just 1 million people, Maldives is right in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So, it's strategic for its traditional partner, India, as well as in recent years, China. So the political economy, if you like, has been very playing a role in trying to shape the politics of Maldives. So the stakes are quite high. And as we have seen, the election was fairly contested, and the victory of Mohamed Muizzi, who is from the opposition, he seems to be more pro-Chinese or tilting towards China, whereas his predecessor, Mohammed Solih, was more tilting towards India. So there is that kind of a geopolitical dimension at play.
Now we understand that Muizzu is a British educated civil engineer. He's only 45 years old. He is the current mayor of Male, which is the country's capital. He was actually seen as an unlikely candidate for presidency after serving as construction minister in the government of his mentor, Abdullah Yamin, who subsequently has been jailed on corruption charges. Do you think something like that would come back to bite him, perhaps?
Well, it's not clear. Look, Maldives, like other nation states, they are part of the United Nations, and they are part of regional bodies like ASEAN, for instance. They would have to adhere to what is called the various norms of government or governance. But the political parties are divided. One is looking towards China. The opposition now would be more towards India, and hopefully they can find a consensus. Firstly, it's a small nation state. It's just 1 million people, and its major income is tourism. So that would be the other dynamic. But yes, governance is important. The court system would have to function like any other nation state, and it's up to the electorate to basically see how the new government would deliver on projects. The reading is that the country is in debt to both India and China. It has racked up debts because these two nations, in some way, are contesting to win the influence of Maldivians. So there have been large infrastructure projects from China, other kinds of projects from India, and there is a level of debt in that the nation has to pay or repay these loans. So yes, smaller nation states in the Indian Oceans are strategic, and the larger players would, by necessity, for their own regional geopolitical reasons, play different roles in the island states such as Maldives.
Ashraf, we talk about repaying of debt, and that's a huge issue, very especially for a small country like the Maldives, who are totally dependent on tourism. We also understand that New Delhi has a history of entanglements with affairs in the Maldives, including the deployment of soldiers to thwart the 1988 coup attempt. And its influence has been a periodic source of resentment in the Muslim majority nation. And I should imagine more so now with hearing of all of the Islamophobic attacks on Muslims in India.
Yes, that undercurrent will always be present, especially with the current government of India, that is very kind of nationalistic, particular to religion and culture, etc. So the undercurrents in the Indian diaspora mirrors the divisions within India today. Sadly, the current government has not managed to create a social cohesion or unity within the Indian diaspora globally, or even within the nation states in the sphere of influence. So they would have to do some serious rethinking on whether the current uh, nationalist policies, which is very narrow, very chauvinistic, is serving the Indian interest. And currently it's not, as we've seen with the crisis between India and Canada in recent weeks, for instance, around the Sikh issue. So there needs to be some very critical reflections on where the nation state policies are going. But be that as it may, geopolitical rivalries will continue, and the world is globalized, through internet communication, social media. So you may be an island state in the middle of the Indian Ocean, but you're connected through virtual communities. And I think this is the nature of the global village as we see. But they should be focused on the key issues, which is on development. Look, it is only 1 million people, but there are different socio-economic classes. There are some levels of exclusion in that society. But the main challenge they face is climate change. So the early days of the UN COP climate change conferences, Maldives has always been a poster child of the island nation states that faces vulnerability to climate change. And that is the big challenge for them. It's a very small island, and with rising tides, it is one of the vulnerable nations because of climate change.
Well, I heard somewhere recently that by the year 2050, when we talk about climate vulnerability regarding the Maldives, that by the year 2050, if they've not contained and secured their position structurally and otherwise, that they would actually not exist any longer. They will actually be underwater, so to speak. And that's exactly what you're referring to, is it not?
Yes, yes. Look, it's not, let's say, a coincidence that the prime minister is a construction engineer, because that's what the country needs: high level engineering capability. Also, the kind of investment they attract from the larger players in the world. They would need to go towards climate resilient technologies. That's very important. The UN is talking about it. The BRICS nations are talking about it. The G20 is talking about what is the future of climate resilient infrastructure. So when nations build bridges or homes or developments, they need to factor in the climate change issues, mitigating floods or droughts. So this would be the challenge for the island nation state of Maldives: the mitigation of dealing with the big issues of the day, climate change. Also, you must remember that is a key tourist destination. Although it's a population of 1 million, it does attract upwards of 15 million tourists a year. So at any given point, there may be equal amount of tourists vis-a-vis citizens, and that creates other kinds of cultural health and other kinds of problems, but particularly the generation of waste, plastics in the oceans, for instance. And the large tourism industry means that it would have to really manage these massive waste management problems, climate change problems. So it's a huge challenge for the nation state of Maldives.
And finally, we also understand that the Maldives sits in a strategically vital position in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It is astride one of the world's busiest east-west shipping lanes. So that does indicate the importance of this little island. And that also, uh, that one makes one realize the interest of both India and China in this area.
Yes, definitely. Trade is the big issue of the day in a post-COVID world. Nation states need to reorientate their supply chains. And yes, the shipping lanes are strategic. Island nation states like Maldives, and other parts of Southeast Asia, the Pacific, the Suez canals, etc. These strategic shipping lanes are very vital for global trade, and Maldives sits in the middle of that, and therefore it becomes a strategic state. Fortunately, the United Nations have guidelines on international oceans management, as well as shipping laws and trade laws and international laws. And all of these, all the major players are signatories. So it is a challenge for the international relations system to manage equitably these kinds of norms that exist in world trade. And nation states such as Maldives should manage all these in a way that benefits them, and also ensures that the future of the island, in a world of climate change and floods, they can mitigate. All you can do now is mitigate, and ensure there's also what is called responsible tourism. So I would say one of the major programs would be around responsible tourism or green tourism. That is the way the world is going in at this point in time.
My final question then to you is, seeing that the new president elect is obviously seems to be favoring his relationship with China rather than India, what do you think the repercussions of that would be from India on the Maldives?
I think, look, both India and China are rivals, but they're also part of the BRICS nations, a community of nations, and the G20 and the UN. And both of the powers would realize that, look, Maldives is a very small nation, and there's no need to sort of have a kind of rivalry that would be detrimental to the nation state. So it's such a small island. Hopefully, the maturity part would play in, and even domestically between the parties, they realized they would need a balance in relations with India and China, but also they need to ensure that all kinds of relationships with these powers would benefit the island state, and would also ensure that it doesn't destabilize the politics, because the smaller states caught up in geopolitical rivalries is that it then destabilizes the nation state's politics and social strata, and therefore both the regional powers and the political elites in Maldives would have to ensure that they keep a level of cohesion and kind of matured relationship with both. It's like an ebb and flow. Sometimes you will have a pro-Indian government, others a pro-Chinese, but at the end of the day, they need to take a kind of national interest position, and whichever of the regional powers can play and make a better kind of investment and trade and development support for the Maldives, then it should be judged on the basis of that kind of investment instead of just choosing this or that. So it has to be very matured, and it has to be very strategic, but it also has to look at the real future, not only for Maldives, but for the Southeast Asia that has a huge population. 3 billion people of the world is in Southeast Asia. So the future of climate change, population mitigation, the technologies and solutions would come from that region. And I think that's a good case study for the Maldives.
And that's where we leave it. Ashraf Patel, always a pleasure talking with you. Ashraf is Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Go well, keep us in your duas, and salamu alaikum to you.
Shukran.
It is exactly 9:28. News and views on Salam Media. Lots more coming your way. Please stay with us. Do remember, we do wrap up at 10 o'clock exactly.